One of the most recent arrivals in my collection is this. This is a Italian 1829, or actually I should say a pre-Italian because 1829 is before the unification of the country. Anyway, it's an 1829 model unmounted officer's saber. It's a bit of a generic name, I know, but it was used by a whole bunch of officers in a whole bunch of different units or sections of the army. So it's really hard to pinpoint actually. It's actually impossible to pinpoint unless you have like inscriptions or something, what unit or what kind of sword variation may have been used by a specific kind of officer. In any case, this is the sword. We're going to be talking about it in more detail in a coming video about the model itself and its history. But today I wanted to actually take it apart and disassemble it. And that is because the blade was delivered a little loose in its hilt, which is not a huge issue, a lot of them are. But while I was kind of taking a look at it and trying to figure out what I would like to do with this sword or how to deal with it, I realized that this button on the end of the pommel here is not a peen, it's a threaded nut, basically. So this sword is a perfect candidate for an easy disassembly and hopefully easy reassembly as well. So I hope you'll join me in discovering what's under the hood of the Italian 1829. And, well, let's get right into it. Okay, time to disassemble a sword. So I know I mentioned we'll be talking about this in more detail in a future video, but I just want to quickly show you the features here of the hilt. This is a horn grip as far as I can tell. It used to have some kind of checkering here in the middle at least. And there's still a brass inlay, it seems. Or maybe, yeah, hard to tell. Yeah, I would say that's a brass inlay here, although it may be the color of the horn. It used to be here too, whatever it was, but it's gone. And the hilt is a interesting stirrup hilt. Nothing really to write home about, but what's really the unique feature of this sword is its pommel here. So whereas the famous German hilts have a lion head here, kind of biting into the end of the knuckle guard, on these swords we have this lovely sea monster, I suppose it is. In some cases there's a dolphin too, I think, but these sea monsters with like an extended snout here are actually very, very common. So also just quickly look at the state of the blade, because I mentioned this one may not need some intense cleaning. So you'll see there's pitting and corrosion, but the overall blade is clean in the sense that there's no active rust, no horrible dirt or grime. It is sharp. So this sword was sharpened at some point for use, at some point in history, by the way, because there's no signs of new sharpening here. And there is, which I hope we'll be able to discover, you can see there, I think, the punch of a maker's mark right in there on the blade. So as we remove the blade here, we're hopefully going to be able to identify what that is. As I mentioned, the blade is slightly loose, so hopefully when we reassemble it, we'll be able to tighten it enough that it comes back into a solid sword again. So let's get to the interesting part here. Initially, you may be confused. I was. This may look like a kind of pommel cap here, or nut over which the end of the blade is peened, but as soon as I started touching it, as you'll see here, it started to move. And well, essentially, by continuing to unscrew it, I realized that it was a threaded tang. So here we go. I'll show you the nut here really quickly. So you can see. So this is clearly a nut of the time. This is not like a modern substitution or addition. Of course, it's nothing surprising, 1829 or after 1829, thread technology was already well on its way. So, oh, okay, let's be a little careful here, but essentially the assembly here comes off. We can remove the grip in one go, and the grip is formed by this ferrule. Let me move this out of the way because it's throwing focus off. So we have a ferrule here, which is brass. It has this vertical line decoration, basically. It has two horizontal bands and then has these little decorated lines. If we check out inside, is there anything noteworthy? No. However, there's definitely remains of gilding there, it seems to me. So this so this at some time would have been gilt, I suppose. It has these 4 notches here, which I wonder what they are. I wonder if they're part of the, like if there's a reason for them or if they're just to kind of orient the ferrule correctly. Sorry for my dirty hands. This blade is actually dirtier than I initially thought. We then have the horn grip, which is not open at the back, as I actually would have thought. I thought this may be just kind of a cover, but it's not. It's a full piece of horn. It's carved, they're hollowed, I mean, inside here. This is very dry, and it's starting to break off here on the side, on the back. So I think some oil here will be a good idea. But other than that, and other than this check ring I mentioned, you can see just vague remains of it. You can hardly feel it even by touching it. There's not much to say about this hilt, about this grip, although it is very comfortable. And we get to the pommel section. This is surprisingly heavy, way more than I would have expected. And essentially, most of the weight in the grip, I feel, is in the pommel, because this long snout here is mostly a solid cast piece of brass. I don't know if you can see there, but it's not empty or hollow. So you essentially have a very small divot here where the knuckle guard kind of fits in. And then you have this section that's hollowed to fit the grip, but other than that, this is a one solid piece of brass. And equally the back strap, if you compare it to a couple of other swords, and I don't remember exactly which ones they were, but for example, I have a Hussar saber. I haven't taken that apart, but I can see between the back strap and the grip because it has shrunk. And it's that's just sheet of steel, basically. This is a really significant chunk of brass here. What we can see here are some file marks. Seems to be some remains of gilding as well, a bunch of old oil for lubricating fun. And what's really nice, I think, here is to see the level of detail in the brass casting. You see the snout here of the sea monster has very, very minute detail on it. And what's even more surprising is under here as well. It's a really beautiful piece of decoration, I would say. Very, very, yeah, definitely not approximate or cheaply made, I would say. But okay, let's move on to the rest, which is not much, to be fair. We have this stirrup hilt, which comes off in one part. The langets are not added on in any way. They are part of the cast. Although there does seem to be here a steel shim or something. It's as if there's a hole in the cast and it was filled with a little piece of steel there. So I don't know. Oh, wait a second. No. So I'm trying to figure out what exactly is going on here, because my initial feeling was that this was brass. It has all the signs of brass. I mean, it has the color, it has the non-tarnished metal feel to it. But then here, where the gilding wore off, it actually has a clear steel color. So I'm struggling to understand. Here there's definitely a little shim. This little piece of steel was kind of pushed in here, whether to kind of fill a gap, I wonder. I don't see any cracks or anything, so... Or is it possible that this langet section only is steel? I'm struggling, because here you also see it's obviously the steel color, it's not brass. And you can also see it under here on the langet. So perhaps this is not brass. Perhaps this is steel. That's then... Or maybe this section only is steel because it needs to be more strong. But then I don't see any signs of brazing or is this a sign of brazing? This is puzzling, to say the least. I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, but there's obviously... I don't see any sign of steel kind of coming through anywhere on the knuckle bow here. This to me would seem like absolutely to be brass, but then this section here seems to me like it's steel, and then it's either plated or... At least here we have some steel. So if anyone is more knowledgeable in how or why there would have been a mix of metals on this stirrup hilt, please let me know. I'm absolutely curious. This is a first taking this sword apart for me, so I don't really have the answers in this video. Moving to the blade, we'll take a look at the threaded tang, but there's nothing really to write home about here. We move up the tang here, and here we have a maker's mark, which I cannot really identify as of yet. There seems to be a letter here, so I'll have to dive into my archives, into my library, and try and figure out what exactly this mark is, unless any of you is really quick at answering and can provide the answer in the comments before I actually find it myself, if I'm able to. But yeah, a big maker's mark. It's unusually large, actually. A lot of times you'll see these are quite smaller. This one is very, very visible, even under the langet. So we may be able... Let's see if we can try and clean it up a little and maybe get some idea of what's underneath. So I have here a trusty sponge and a little bit of balstil. So we'll see if we can, if maybe we can unseat some grime in there and maybe get to see some better details on the marking. But I'm not too certain it's going to work. Okay, let's see if there's any improvement. Okay, let's check that out. So, do we... Oh, yes, we absolutely have an improvement. Let me get this out of the way because it's throwing focus off. And let's take a look here. So, I'm not sure it's really that visible on camera, but to me it seems like there's a very clear F here. Actually, this is one of those cases where it's worse on camera than in real life. An F. You can kind of see the top branch there, and then the bottom one coming down to the left, and then a little bar in between. So it's under a crown or some kind of fiery thing on the top. So anyway, this is very useful. It'll... Oh, boy. There's some more interesting stuff here. Look, the shoulder of the blade was repaired. So the actual shoulder of the blade here came up here, up to here, and here up to at least here, or maybe here. And then I think this may be lead. Yeah, it's a soft metal. I don't know if it's lead, but it's definitely a soft metal here. And then this was added in between to kind of create a new shoulder, a pair of shoulders here on the blade. So, well, and that's all I have to say about this blade. We'll actually give it a quick oil and clean, since we already have the sponge and we already have the oil. So this is a little bonus to the video, I hope. But all in all, a quite interesting blade. It has this little repair down here. It has a very interesting maker's mark I'm not too familiar with. And it has that weird situation with the crossguard or section of the hilt being not exactly brass or some kind of brass plated steel or something like that, if that is even possible. We'll just give it a quick cleanup. Even though, as I mentioned, it's a fairly clean blade, so it doesn't really... It's not an urgent need of cleaning, but it can never hurt to oil up a blade a bit, especially if we can get in here in the fuller. Well, it wasn't dirty, but it also was definitely not clean. We can see a decent amount of dirt there, so I think this will be sufficient for now. And then we can get to reassembling it. So here we go, the blade after a slight oiling. We have our maker's mark, very beautiful there. And time to reassemble everything. So we will start with the guard here. This is a fairly easy to reassemble sword, I would say. I'll actually also dab the horn in some oil, just to hopefully lessen the state of extreme dryness it's in at the moment. There we go. Also clean that up a little bit. I have not had so far any negative effects by using Autosol on horn, so I'm fairly comfortable with using it. I may always be disproven, but for now it works. So we'll reassemble the grip structure here, and it's then just a matter of sliding it onto the tang here. We then make sure that the guard here is set in the divot in the sea monster's mouth. And we can then grab our nut here and being careful not to damage the thread, we can then tighten it up. So I'll now just tighten it by hand. You see the blade is still a little loose. I'll later get a piece of leather and tighten it with a tool so it's a little more fixed in its place. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you ever have one of these, now you know how to take it apart. Thank you for watching, and see you soon in another sword video. Bye!